Imagine pulling a phone out of your pocket in 2026 and knowing it's powered not by Android or iOS, but by pure Linux. No Google services tracking your activity. No locked-down ecosystem forcing you into one app store. No forced updates you can't control. Just a clean, open, community-driven operating system that feels different the moment you swipe the screen. That's the promise people have been chasing for years, and now in 2026, Ubuntu Touch is closer than ever to becoming a serious daily driver option. For a long time, Ubuntu Touch felt like a dream that almost happened. Back in the early 2010s, Canonical, the company behind Ubuntu, tried to enter the smartphone market. The vision was bold: one operating system across phone, tablet, and desktop. Plug your phone into a monitor and it would transform into a full desktop experience. It was futuristic, ambitious, and maybe just a little too early. The hardware wasn't ready. The app ecosystem wasn't ready. And the market was already dominated by Android and iOS. Eventually, Canonical stepped away from the mobile dream. But the story didn't end there. Instead of dying, Ubuntu Touch was picked up by a passionate community known as the UBports Foundation. What makes this important is that Ubuntu Touch stopped being a corporate experiment and became something much more powerful: a community-driven operating system. Volunteers, developers, Linux enthusiasts, privacy advocates, and dreamers kept it alive. Slowly, version after version, update after update, they rebuilt it on modern Ubuntu bases, improved hardware compatibility, and refined the user experience. Fast forward to 2026 and the difference is night and day compared to the early community builds. The interface feels polished. The animations are smoother. The system stability has improved dramatically. Under the hood, it's based on newer Ubuntu LTS foundations, which means better driver support, improved security patches, and a more modern Linux stack. Performance on supported devices is no longer a proof of concept. It's genuinely usable. The first thing you notice about Ubuntu Touch in 2026 is how different it feels. There are no traditional home screen icons scattered everywhere by default. Instead, you get scopes and a gesture-driven interface. Swipe from the left to access your apps. Swipe from the right to switch between open applications. Swipe from the top for indicators like Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and battery. The gesture system feels natural and efficient once you get used to it. It's not copying Android. It's not copying iOS. It's doing its own thing. Privacy is one of the biggest selling points. In 2026, people are more aware than ever of data collection, targeted advertising, and digital surveillance. Ubuntu Touch doesn't come with Google Play services baked into the system. There's no default corporate tracking infrastructure. The operating system is open source. Anyone can inspect the code. That transparency builds trust in a way that proprietary platforms simply can't match. For users who care about digital sovereignty, this matters. Now let's talk about apps, because this is where mobile operating systems live or die. In the early days, Ubuntu Touch struggled heavily in this area. The native App Store felt empty compared to Android or iOS, but in 2026, things look different. The Open Store has grown significantly, offering messaging apps, browsers, media players, note-taking apps, and utilities built specifically for Ubuntu Touch. More importantly, web technologies have matured. Progressive web apps run smoothly. Many modern services work well in the browser, and Ubuntu Touch's browser engine is far more capable now than it was years ago. There's also continued work on compatibility layers. While Ubuntu Touch is not Android, projects that enable running certain Android applications in containers have improved. The experience isn't perfect, and not every app works, but the gap has narrowed. For many users, especially those who rely on messaging, email, browsing, and media consumption, Ubuntu Touch now covers the essentials. Hardware support is another major leap forward. In the past, Ubuntu Touch ran mostly on older community-supported Android devices with limited features. In 2026, official and community-supported devices include more modern hardware with better cameras, faster processors, and improved battery life. Some manufacturers have shown cautious interest in shipping Linux-based phones directly to consumers. Even when not pre-installed, the flashing process for supported devices has become more streamlined with clearer documentation and automated tools. One of the most exciting parts of Ubuntu Touch in 2026 is Convergence. That original dream hasn't disappeared. Plug certain supported phones into a monitor with a keyboard and mouse, and the interface transforms into a desktop-like environment. You can open multiple windows, browse files, and use LibreOffice-style productivity tools. It's not just a gimmick anymore. It's genuinely functional for light productivity tasks. For students, developers, and minimalists, carrying a single device that becomes both phone and computer is incredibly appealing. Battery optimization has also improved. Earlier builds drained power quickly due to inefficient drivers and background processes. Now power management is far more refined. On supported hardware, standby times are competitive, and everyday usage like messaging and browsing can comfortably last through a full day. It's not always equal to flagship Android devices, but it's no longer a deal-breaker. Security updates are delivered in a transparent way. Because the system is built on Ubuntu's long-term support base, security patches are taken seriously. Users can see what's being updated and why. There's no mystery about what the operating system is doing behind the scenes. For people who value control, this is a powerful shift from the opaque updates pushed silently by major corporations. Of course, Ubuntu Touch in 2026 is not perfect. There are still challenges. Some banking apps may not work. Certain proprietary streaming services may have limitations due to DRM. High-end mobile gaming is not its strength. If your life depends on a specific Android-only application, you may run into compatibility issues. But for a growing group of users, that trade-off is acceptable in exchange for freedom and privacy. The community around Ubuntu Touch is another key factor. Forums are active. Developers respond to bug reports. Updates are discussed openly. Roadmaps are shared. This level of transparency creates a feeling of collaboration rather than consumption. You're not just a user. You're part of an ecosystem. In 2026, this matters more than ever as people seek alternatives to centralized tech giants. Performance-wise, Ubuntu Touch feels lighter than many Android skins loaded with bloatware. The system focuses on essentials. There are no pre-installed social media apps you didn't ask for. No carrier junk. No background analytics eating your resources. On mid-range hardware, this efficiency becomes noticeable. Apps launch quickly. Multitasking feels fluid within the system's limits. Another interesting development in 2026 is the growing interest in Linux-based ecosystems beyond the desktop. Steam Deck popularized Linux gaming. More laptops ship with Linux pre-installed. Privacy-focused communities are expanding. Ubuntu Touch benefits from this broader cultural shift. It's no longer seen as a weird experiment. It's part of a larger movement toward open platforms. Developers are also experimenting with new UI toolkits and modernizing the look and feel. The design language in 2026 feels cleaner and more refined than earlier versions. Dark mode is polished. Accessibility features have improved. Text scaling, screen readers, and gesture customization make the system more inclusive. These improvements signal maturity. For content creators and tech enthusiasts, Ubuntu Touch is exciting because it represents possibility. It challenges the idea that only two companies can dominate mobile computing. Even if it doesn't overtake Android or iOS. Its mere existence pushes the conversation forward about user rights, open standards, and digital independence. In 2026, installing Ubuntu Touch no longer feels like installing a science project. It feels like installing a serious alternative. The documentation is clearer. The flashing tools are more user-friendly. The onboarding experience guides new users through gestures and system basics. There's still a learning curve, but it's manageable. One of the strongest arguments in its favor is longevity. Many Android devices stop receiving official updates after a few years. With Ubuntu Touch, community support can extend the life of hardware beyond what manufacturers intended. That means less electronic waste and more sustainable technology usage. Imagine a world where your phone respects you, where you decide what runs on it, where updates don't remove features you relied on. Ubuntu Touch in 2026 isn't fully there yet, but it's closer than ever. It's stable enough for enthusiasts to use daily. It's polished enough to demonstrate serious progress. It's supported enough to attract new contributors. The big question is whether it can break out of its niche. That depends on hardware partnerships, app ecosystem growth, and continued community energy. But compared to where it was just a few years ago, the progress is undeniable. Ubuntu Touch is no longer just surviving. It's evolving. For viewers watching this in 2026, the idea of a Linux phone may not sound crazy anymore. It might sound practical. It might even sound necessary. As debates about digital rights intensify worldwide, having alternatives becomes crucial. Ubuntu Touch stands as proof that open-source projects can endure, adapt, and improve against overwhelming odds. So is Ubuntu Touch ready to replace Android or iOS for everyone? Not yet, but is it really close to being a viable choice for thousands, maybe millions of users who prioritize privacy, openness, and control? Absolutely. The gap is smaller than ever before. And perhaps the most powerful thing about Ubuntu Touch in 2026 isn't just the software itself. It's what it represents: persistence, community, the refusal to let an idea die. A decade ago, many declared Linux on phones finished. Today, it's quietly building momentum again. Ubuntu Touch in 2026 is really close. Close to mainstream viability, close to stable convergence, close to proving that open-source mobile computing isn't a fantasy. And if the progress of the past few years is any indication, the next few years could be even more transformative. The question isn't whether Ubuntu Touch can survive, it already has. The real question is whether users are ready to take control of their mobile experience. If they are, Ubuntu Touch is waiting.